Hi everyone, in this tutorial we'll be creating the smoke texture in Substance Designer. So let me play the whole sequence for you so you can see this red smokes that comes from the hammer and from the cast during the this cast animation and effect, and also right here as I'm using this as a secondary trail as well. Okay, so I think it's a very versatile texture that you can use for some soft effects as trails, and that's how it looks like. Okay, so let's jump into Substance and let's start making this texture. Okay, so let's see if we can recreate that smoke texture. It might be a bit tricky, but hopefully we can go through it and have something similar or the same that I've built before. So let's have a shape first. I'm going to get a disc, and I would like to create a smaller disc or maybe like a ring. So I'm just gonna blend that one with another exactly the same shape here, and I'm gonna set it to maybe subtract. I'm gonna scale one of those down just to get this ring. However, I would like to get maybe smaller ring, so scale that one and scale that one as well, just to get that sort of ring. Okay, cool. Next, I'm gonna use a tile sampler. I'm gonna plug this into the pattern input 1. Double click on tile sampler, and for the pattern, I'm gonna use my input. Here for the amount, I'm gonna keep it maybe 9 by 9, but I need a various scale of it. Maybe something like this, and I need a position random as well, so it's a lot more random than normally. Obviously gonna scale this down a little bit, and next I'm just gonna try to blur it. I'm gonna go with the default one, and next I'm gonna use maybe a slope blur, put the same there, max the samples, however just lower the intensity, and I'm gonna try different things, maybe max, I think maybe min. Cool. Alright, gonna leave it like this. Next I'm gonna use a multi-directional warp grayscale, and I'm gonna use Perlin noise for the intensity. Obviously the Perlin noise is way too big, so I'm gonna scale it down like this. And for the intensity, let's see if we can actually implement slightly different settings for that one. I'm gonna put maybe 50. I'm gonna keep going up. I'm gonna stop maybe at 74. I'm gonna try the different rotation of it, but doesn't seem to give me anything, so I'm gonna stop at that random value. I'm gonna leave those as they are. However, I want to go back to the slope maybe and try different settings here. So I think I'm gonna go with just 2 samples, a very low intensity as well, and actually I'm gonna go back to blur. It doesn't seem like it's doing anything really, so we might as well let me try without it. We are getting a little bit more data with the slope, so let's go with that slope. Okay, so I think that will be our first texture. It's gonna give us this different grayscale variation. I think we're just gonna add this on top of what we're gonna build next. So let's start with the Perlin noise, and I'm gonna use a slope blur. I'm gonna plug it that one here as well. Perlin noise, scale down, so I could get maybe something like this. Next, I'm gonna invert this. That's gonna give me a little bit like those caustic textures, or maybe warp Voronoi. Next, I'd like to increase the contrast of it, so that will be a histogram scan, just so I can get a little bit more depth in some of those areas. keeping those highlighted. It's going to give us a bit more random results, I hope. Next, multi-directional warp grayscale. And I'm going to use maybe the same Perlin noise, but I'm going to run it through blur with the default value and plug it in here. Alright, for this one, let's maybe get intensity. Let's start with 50. Okay, maybe a little bit more, just so we get good. We can get those lines. For the direction, I'm just gonna use one direction because I would like to just warp those slightly. I'm not gonna use any rotation on it. However, I do want to get different results. I'm gonna duplicate exactly the same warp grayscale, plug it in here. And maybe I'm gonna get this Perlin noise instead. And for the settings, I just think I'm gonna get maybe slightly more. I think I'm gonna increase the directions here up to 4, and I'm gonna play with the rotation as well. So I get a lot more lines, which I believe is gonna help us a little bit. Okay, so let's blend those two together now. And let's see what it's gonna give us. Let's try add. Actually, add might work. I wanted to say let's try max and min. I think actually add is gonna give us exactly what we want. Cool. Let's get histogram scan next, so we can make it slightly brighter. Just before it's gonna start being too bright in here, I'm gonna stop. Contrast, you can play with it, however I'm not gonna touch it in this one. I would like to get some highlights in that texture as well, so I'm gonna grab my let me see, this warp grayscale. I'm gonna run it through maybe edge detect. Okay, okay, maybe something like this. I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but let's try. Blur, maybe with a intensity of 5. Let's go with this, and let's get non-uniform directional warp grayscale in here. I'm just gonna put Perlin noise just to see if I can get something out of it. Scale might be a little bit too big. Okay, I'm gonna go with 20. I think 20 might be good. Trail mode max. I'm gonna see if I can increase the trail length. It's gonna give us this slight blur behind it. I'm not gonna add any rotation to it. I think I'm gonna get that texture and run it through a directional blur, maybe to add a bit more lines, and I'm gonna blend it back in onto those using, I think add might be a little bit too much, although it's gonna give us those nice highlights that we want, so maybe let's keep it. Let me check the settings here. I think should be okay with the directional blur. I'm actually gonna try a max, maybe. Might be too strong. Yeah, I'm gonna go with max. Okay, so it gives us a little bit of lines onto this pattern, which is cool. And finally, let's try to blend those two together. For the blend, I'm gonna use maybe add. Obviously, that's a little bit overblown and over the top as well. So let me try maybe max, and with the opacity, I think we can control those additional blurs or lines there. So I'm just gonna keep it as it is. I wonder if it's actually too strong and we should blur it. So let's get blur a little bit on it. With the value, let's try maybe 2. I think 2 might be too much. Maybe just 1, just to soften some of the areas. And the next bit is, let's see if we can create this look of it like a chromatic aberration. So let me get a transform, and that will be in the middle, so I'm not going to touch this one. I'm going to just copy that transform here, So they all have the same values. However, this one I'm just gonna offset it maybe to 0.1 and 0.1, or rather 0.01, and this one's going to be actually gonna delete that one, copy the one with the 0.01, and I'm gonna just put them in the reverse. Perfect. And the next bit, I'm just gonna use RGB merge, plug those here, and because they got this offset, you can see they got a little bit of this chromatic aberration effect on it. You can increase it, I think, by adding slightly different values onto those. I'm just gonna keep it at 1 because I wanted to show you this effect. However, maybe I'm gonna do a tutorial on it in the engine at some point, but right now I'm just gonna have that texture, save it, and maybe I can do a couple things with it. Okay, next I'm gonna get a glow. Obviously way too much. I just need a subtle highlight. Glow size, gonna increase it to the max, and obviously if you wanna have a specific color that's gonna influence your glow, you can do it here. I'm just gonna go with the white so I could get slight highlights, and I will see how it might look in the engine later on. And finally, let's actually blend this, because that might be like a tileable texture that I might use for something. However, I need this to be a mask, so I'm gonna get a shape. I'm gonna get the soft circle, and you can plug it there by just run it through gradient map here and multiply. However, you get this rounded circle, which I really don't like, so I think to make it slightly a bit more natural, you can run it through a multi-directional warp grayscale with the pedaling noise on the low scale. Maybe something like this. And now we can increase this intensity maybe to up to 100. Let's try different settings. So min, max, chain. Chain obviously is not going to work, so I'm going to go with average. You can go with 4 directions as well. I'm going to apply a slight blur to it to get rid of some of the lines, and that will be my mask. Obviously it's a little bit too close to the edges. What you can do now is just go to the shape, scale it down slightly, and you're gonna get this irregular circle. Obviously you can play with the blur a little bit more if you want. Put maybe 50 there if you want a bit more data, and then you can scale down your circle a little bit more, and that's gonna give you a lot better result in my opinion. Okay. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I think it's pretty cool. That texture, it works on many effects for me. If some of the shapes are a little bit too strong for you, you can try to blur it a little bit in here. Maybe I'm gonna put 5, but to me it's just a little bit too soft like this. With 0, I think those lines might be a little bit too sharp, so it might be difficult to erode them in the engine without causing artifacts. I'm just gonna put maybe 1 as I had, just to smooth it out a little bit, and I think I'm just gonna import that to the engine and work on the hammer impact effect. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you're gonna use that texture, and hopefully in the future I can do a little bit more tutorials in the engine about how to use that texture. Alright, thank you so much.